With more than 6,000 small and micro-cap companies listed, if you're looking for the next Apple at the earliest stage, then channelchek truly is the orchard. The listed companies support channelchek, so it's free for you, the potential investor, to gain access to institutional quality research from FINRA licensed analysts, advanced market data, industry reports, news, and a growing catalog of videos and webcasts. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and register for channelchek so you're always up to date on what's going on at the small and microcap data place. Welcome to the C-Suite series presented by channelchek and Noble Capital Markets. Noble is an SEC-registered, FINRA-licensed broker-dealer and the source of the equity research available on channelchek. Today's interview features Esports Entertainment Group, NASDAQ ticker symbol GMBL. Noble Senior Research Analyst Michael Kupinski interviews Esports Entertainment Group Chairman and CEO Grant Johnson. Visit channelchek.com or click the link in the description for Noble's research on Esports Entertainment Group, as well as news and advanced market data. And now, here's Michael and Grant.
Today we have Grant Johnson, the CEO, Chairman, and President of Esports Entertainment, a premier esports online gambling company. Welcome, Grant. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Michael. Pleasure to be here.
So, Grant, we call these C-suite interviews, and so it's a way for us to kind of get to know the management team a little bit. And so I was wondering, you have an interesting background story on how you started esports, but before we get to that, I would like to get to your story, how you got started, your background prior to esports.
Sure. My background in the online gaming business goes right back to Genesis, really. The industry started around 95. I got involved late 1995 through 99. I was head of business development for one of the original big three B2B platforms. And back then it was Microgaming, Boss Media, and StarNet. I left the industry in 1999 and pursued a career in online healthcare products. Which is where I stayed in that industry until about 2010. In 2014, I was approached by the Philo Hill Quappel. It's a group of coalition of native tribes in Western Canada, and they wanted to emulate effectively what the Ganawagi, the Mohawks, and Ganawagi outside of Montreal were doing, where they were licensing online operators that were hosted on servers on their sovereign territory. I accepted the contract and said, let me look around and see what's new, because I hadn't been in the online gaming business for a little over a decade at that time. And that's when I came across esports. I was, talking with Alex Lim, who was on our board of directors now, but at the time he was the Secretary General of the International Esports Federation out of Seoul, Korea, where esports really all started. And Ken Silva in Toronto, who was the founder of Esports Canada. And I'd been doing some online searching and came across esports, which is very much under the radar in 2014. And I was quite curious, just from the research I was doing, just how big it was, and there was passionate fan bases, and it was global. And they advised, listen, we could talk about this for months, but the only way to really understand it is to come see an event live. And probably like everybody else in 2014, I thought I was going to be going to an event full of teenagers, who were normally in their basements playing on game stations or consoles, because I had a teenage son doing exactly the same thing. So what ended up happening was I attended an event. It was a StarCraft championship out by the airport here in Toronto. And there was 5,000 fans at the event. I don't think there was any teenagers in the crowd. If they were the minority. There was all 20-somethings, and they were passionately engaged. Now, I had never seen StarCraft, which is one of the more complex esports titles. At the time, it was one of the major titles. Still is in Korea. But what I did know was, what I known about esports was all wrong. It was 20 plus was a huge demographic. They were very engaged. These were not reclusive individuals. This was it was like going to a rock concert, the level of intensity and the music and the smoke and the laser show, etc. I went back and told the tribes, I said, this, I think, is the next big thing. This is where you've got to focus your energies. They elected to pass. We shook hands, parted ways, and that's when I started the company. And we started at V Gambling was the name of the company initially. But that was prior to the Supreme Court ruling that online gambling wasn't illegal in jurisdictions where it was a regulatory framework existed. So we struggled initially with the name. We focused all our energies offshore. But as soon as that ruling came down in 2018, the game changed completely. We changed our name from V Gambling to Esports Entertainment Group to give us a larger, brand to work under, because we'll get into it, I'm sure, in this conversation. We structured our company different than everybody else has, and it's been a pretty wild ride from there to our uplisting last April, a year ago. We're 1 year old now.
I think what's interesting, Greg, is that a lot of people would find it interesting about the demographic and the broad demographic that esports generates. I think that's very interesting. Can you talk a little bit about the company's plans to vertically integrate into esports, from tournaments to wagering, and talk a little bit about this strategy and how it differentiates you and why you believe it creates unique growth opportunities for esports entertainment?
Sure. Well, as you just mentioned, we have a vertically integrated approach to the market. Most operators in the space, it's not a flattering term, so I guess I should find a new one, but they're kind of one-trick ponies. They do tournaments, they have physical venues, they have gambling, they write code, they own a team. They focus on the one area. And that works great as long as nothing changes. And we just come through a year where everything changed, and companies that had a single, strategy, many of them suffered harshly. So our plan was to make ourselves different, make ourselves less vulnerable through shifts in the market, and also make ourselves more attractive as a partner for organizations. So we have Vi, which is our online esports wagering platform. We have Vi.bet, which operates internationally, and then we have ViGG, which will be launching in New Jersey. That'll be, to the best of my knowledge, the first licensed US-facing esports gambling website. Then we have EGL. You've seen a lot about EGL in the news recently because that is the platform. It's a tournament platform. We use that platform to partner with the sports teams. We've partnered with the Broncos and the Eagles and the Patriots and Philly Union and LA Kings and LA Galaxy and Ravens. So we've got 7 pro sports teams already partnered with us there, where they're our marketing partner effectively. They market the platform to their fans to sign up on our platform to play for prizes of the sports team. So it's for working with us to engage their fans in an area where their fans clearly want to be engaged in, which is video gaming. They learned this because all their players are also gamers. Because if you think of it, pro athletes are generally early 20s, and when they're not playing playing the sport, they're playing video games, and so are their fans. Their fans are playing video games as well. Then you come down to the ground level, and you're talking about physical infrastructure. Well, that's where Helix comes in. Helix and GG Circuit. The best example of Helix would be at Patriot Place. It's a large esport gaming center plugged directly into a traditional sports facility. To the best of my knowledge, I believe that's the largest one in North America. It was the first that done such a thing. It's a 14,000 square foot facility. It's highly successful. However, COVID clearly had an impact on their ability to operate. They're only up now to about 50%. They expect to be back to 100% end of May. GG Circuit is the software platform that the majority of LAN centers run off of. If you think of Vindex, Simplicity, GameWorks, Amuka, Helix, they all run off the GG Circuit software platform that drives the gaming machine, the rigs. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, one of the newest additions on that side is the LANDuel product. And this is I'm going to play you, Michael. We're going to play Valorant, Fortnite, Madden, Mario Karts. Doesn't matter what we play, a video game. We're going to bet against each other. We're going to kick $10 into the pot. Winner take all. House takes a commission. That's skill play. So it's not gambling. It's betting. We'll be launching that in New Jersey early summer, late spring, sometime just after Memorial Day. in Atlantic City. So we're pretty excited about that. So that's the whole vertical integration of esports. So we kind of have the top menu, the whole menu. That's when the teams are partnering with us. We're talking to casinos as well, because we can offer them, how deep do you want to go into esports? You want to just start with tournaments and look at bringing the LAN centers in, and they can take it off as we go along. So we're a natural partner for them. The reason we also have iGaming, Sport Nation, Lucky Dino, is that's a mature industry that's been around since the iGaming industry is 25 years old now. It's a globally $100 billion industry. And the reason we have that, really twofold. One, it strengthens our financial statements. It gives us the strength to play the long game in esports. Number two, it brings us additional licenses. In the case of Argyle, when we acquired them, that gave us a UK license. It gave us an Irish license. We already had our Malta license, and we're of course getting the New Jersey license. With Lucky Dino, it opened up the Nordic regions for us because that's where they've been focusing their energy. So it opens up these new markets for us. So there's a lot of synergies, which we expect to accelerate our growth because of that. And we'll do acquisitions in both for that reason. One is the machine that feeds the growth of the other. The bigger play, the longer play here is no question is esports. It's the younger industry. It's the one that has the most opportunity, and it's where we've been focusing the majority of our assets. But that's the reason behind it.
Well, as you know, Grant, everyone has a critic, right? So some of the critics of the company would say, jack of all trades, master of none, regarding your vertical strategy. But I don't think that this applies to you. I think it easily applies to others that are trying to get into your business. But how do you address the critics that might say that the company is spreading itself a little too thin?
Well, frankly, nobody has ever asked me that, but I suspect that does get out there. Well, how I would address those critics is there's a reason the Patriots and the Eagles and the Broncos and the Kings, of all the companies that are out there, they chose to partner with us because they can partner with anybody. Those are the biggest brands in North America. And the reason they partnered with us is because our strategy is one that addresses their needs and makes sense to them. Look at companies that, pre-COVID, Allied and Super League were fine companies. There's nothing wrong with their production. It's in a growth market. COVID, because those strategies were focused around a physical event. Who could have possibly imagined that COVID would happen? And who would imagine we'd still be here 12, 13 months later? Nobody could have predicted that. However, if you just have a single strategy, you're vulnerable to a shift, and who knows what the next shift in the market could be. So I'm a believer of the vertical integration because it protects us from swings in the market. It makes us a logical solution to two new verticals that I don't think our competitors are able to approach, which is the pro sports teams, which clearly we're successful at. I'd like to add, we have not called a single team. Every one of the teams have reached out to us to ask us to help them with this solution. We're talking to probably 36 teams across the various leagues. So it has resonated with them. And of course, the other big vertical it allows us to approach is the casino industry, the land-based casino industry. And I don't, if we just had a tournament platform or just had an online gambling platform, I don't think we would be the right partner for either of those two groups. So critics, everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's entitled to an opinion. We have our plan, and our opinion is we're going to keep executing it.
Yeah, I think all you had to say is the COVID issue last year, and this would have been a different conversation had you not been diversified. That's for and vertically integrated. As you look at the company today, what do you think's missing? How would you think about M&A at this point?
We're still looking into, with fantasy esports, are we going to build it? Because we have, I believe, 35 programmers in-house now, so we've got an awful lot of talent in-house. The question becomes velocity. does it make sense for us to build it or buy it? So we are looking at both, which is the best direction for us to go with fantasy, because we do want to add that with the ViGG platform out of Jersey. More mobile solutions. We're still, eyes and ears are open, and we're exploring the market for opportunities with mobile, unique esport video game mobile applications. On the iGaming front, our M&A activities are focused around, does it open new markets for us, bring us new licenses, which we can then market esports into? Does it bring us any new technology, i.e. a poker site perhaps, or a slot site that is complementary to the casino and the sportsbook sites we have? And of course, as mentioned, is it accretive? Is it profitable? Those are really the determining factors when we decide if, when an iGaming firm. Esports, our focus is on unique technologies at this point in time, because our approach in esports has been both offensive and defensive. Offensive, we want to have the product mix that we can penetrate the market and attract partners to us. Defensive, in that those that would choose to emulate us, and that's already happened. It's happened. People trying to copy what we're doing. When you lock down key assets, like GG Circuit is a perfect example. It took 10 years to build that software platform. It's 5 million hours of coding to copy it. It would take a hell of a lot to duplicate what we have. Helix, they run two of the biggest esports centers in the United States, and the only one that I'm aware of with specifically what we're trying to do with the pro teams. So we that's really where the strategy will continue. If it's unique, it adds value, we seek to conduct a transaction on esports. On the iGaming, if it's accretive, it opens up new markets to us. That's what drives that decision.
And Grant, I know that we touched a little bit on the pandemic, but I was just wondering your thoughts about the past year and how has the pandemic actually helped you in certain ways, and then if the lack of in-person tournament play, has that been detrimental in any way? Can you just give us your thoughts about last year?
Well, overall, the pandemic, and it's kind of strange to say this, was a bit of a boost to the company, because as people were locked in, they weren't able to socialize normally. They weren't able to go about their business normally. They went online, and that's where a lot of our domains reside online. The Lucky Dino, the Sport Nation, Vi, those are all online. EGL had to pivot, because most of what we did tournament-wise over in Europe, or what they had done prior to being acquired by us, was to run physical tournaments. So absolutely, that was detrimental to their business. Any online operator or any physical operator, including Helix. So what we did with EGL is we beefed up the software platform so it was more suited for online tournaments, which is of course what we've been executing as I just mentioned. So just as we were talking about why our strategy with the vertical integration to make us diversified, to allow us to adjust to changes in the market, that's two perfect examples. 3 of our sites blossomed and benefited from people being locked inside. 2 were negatively affected. We adjusted 1 so that now that became a positive for 1. Now that allowed us to ride out the storm, so to speak, and benefit from it. And with the Helix, they'll be back on their feet in the next 30 to 45 days, back into full operations, because it's all their centers are in the United States, which my understanding would be, knock on wood, fully open by June. So that drives home my point. Why would we have this diversified portfolio? Even our own company, certain parts were negatively affected by it, certain parts benefited from it. Makes us a little more resistant to change.
Well, it's good that you weathered the storm. Can you talk a little bit about New Jersey license? I know that it's a little bit of a disappointment in that you had hoped that you would have the license by this time, it sounded like. And can you just give us a little update on that process?
Yeah, sure. Whenever you're dealing with a regulator, any regulatory body, and after, I think the gambling industry would probably be the second most regulated industry after banking. So the framework and the criteria it's very involved. All of our directors had to submit to background checks, Interpol, FBI, fingerprints. I think we probably had a total of about 2,000, maybe 3,000 pages in documentation that had to be submitted. So that took a while to gather, and a lot of it fingerprints. That was complicated by COVID, making appointments and going in the various jurisdictions in Malta and the UK, in Seoul, Korea, and New Zealand, Canada, United States. So I had to gather that. That was a hindrance. Getting it submitted. We're in the process now. We're just really waiting for the Gaming Commission to give us the thumbs up that we can finish testing our software. So yes, to your point, we're a little disappointed with the time it takes. However, that's also a barrier to entry to those that would choose to follow in our footsteps. So I'll pull that as the sunshine of it. We do speak with them regularly. There's been no indication that it won't be proceeding. I would rather be up than not, but it's imminent. It's just it's in the regulators' hands how fast we get through this process. I suspect I probably said online several times I thought we'd be up by April. It's probably going to be July, subject to change.
And the fact of the matter is that you had planned to get the New Jersey license and then pursue other states. And I know that more states have legalized sports betting, including recently Maryland and Arizona, for instance. And as you look to your next jurisdiction, does the process of where you are with New Jersey kind of hold it up a little bit, or are you pursuing additional states for licenses and so forth? And then maybe you could just tie that into the regulatory environment that you see currently.
Yeah, to answer your question, we are in discussions in other jurisdictions. Our strategy, the states is unique in the regulatory framework. Up until now and currently, it's a two-part system. You certainly have to go to the Gaming Commission in each respective state that has a commission, make your application, be subject to the background checks, etc. The good news is that New Jersey and Nevada are the thought leaders. They're considered the two dominant because of Las Vegas and Atlantic City. They've got the most expertise in gaming. So we kind of came into one of the more experienced, more detail-centric commissions. The good news is once you're through that process, any other jurisdiction you pursue will just want the same information. So it'll make each subsequent jurisdiction easier. The other factor in the states is there's a skins program, and effectively what that is, the existing operators in each state, casinos, horse tracks, etc., were granted a certain number of online licenses. And the philosophy behind it was if an online casino or an online sportsbook was going to come into the state of Pennsylvania, it was going to have a negative effect on the land-based operators in that state who had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes and jobs and et cetera, and had contributed to the economic fabric of the state. That makes an awful lot of sense. That you then, an online operator, would lease the right to operate in that state from the casino, so they were compensated for you coming into their space. Perfectly logical. Esports, there isn't a casino in the United States that does esports, period. So some of the jurisdictions we're talking to, let me back up. So our plan then was to use the EGL platform, the tournament platform, partner with these teams, determine where the high concentrations of fans were, and that would drive our decision making as to which the next state we would apply for a license in. So we had to be, we'll call it more strategic than some of the larger operators in the space, like DraftKings has the economic weight that they just went out and bought all the licenses. We have to be a little more frugal with our shareholders' money, we'll say. So that was the plan, but now that remains a good strategy, we believe. But now what's happened, some of the regulators recognize that esports isn't going to cannibalize anything in the land-based operators and has an opportunity for the states to bring innovation and new technology into the state. And in our case, open gaming centers as well as be online. So some of the states that we're talking to are contemplating uncoupling esports from the gambling framework. That has not happened yet. We're hopeful that it does. If it does, we will pursue those states more aggressively. If it doesn't, we'll stick with plan A, which is waiting to see where the larger concentrations are. That was kind of a long answer to your question, but yes, we are pursuing other states, and Jersey's, because of the regulatory framework, will be the template we'll just use and submit that documentation. It'll expedite the next one.
No, I appreciate the color. You touched a little bit about your Helix and GG Circuit acquisition, and was wondering, where do you stand on funding for this acquisition, and when do you plan to close at this point?
Well, a few things had to happen, and finally things are in motion. We have to wait for the audit to be completed. It is now completed as of last week. We won't be doing an equity offering just because, irrespective of the fact that 5 analysts suggest we should be higher than $20, clearly the market hasn't been cooperating with that. So, and I would never do a down round. It just would never happen. So we've had multiple groups approaches with structured debt, bonds, premium convertibles at much higher levels. So we're investigating the best options, could be best for us and best for the shareholders and the least dilutive. So we probably will make a decision, not in the distant future, sometime towards the end of next month, I suspect. And we have on hand, theoretically or technically, we have the cash on hand that we could conclude the transaction. So we don't have to go to market at all at this time. If we do so, it'll only be if we have favorable terms. I would never do something. This is my 5th time to the capital markets of a public company. I've experienced what can go wrong when you do the wrong kind of financing. So I've got some seasoning on that. With the right opportunity, we have an active shelf. If the share price recovered, we would consider using that. But as mentioned, I think Jeff also had a similar comment the other day that we don't have to go to market. We will only do so under favorable terms.
And Grant, it seems like Helix has so many great growth opportunities, and one includes building out large facility platforms, but also venues that may be in sports complexes like Sky Zone, for instance. Are both viable growth opportunities, or is one preferred over the other?
We elected to move forward with the acquisition of Helix because they do an excellent job. We've looked at a lot of operators, and they definitely have done a superior job over their competitors, in our opinion. That said, with all things, we're going to prioritize, and it's all going to come down to return on investment. They've got a good strategy because of our relationships with the pro teams. We certainly want to pursue those first as opportunities to install Helix centers with the big sports venues. Clearly they have the footpath, the foot traffic. They have the branding. In the case of, I don't think there's an NFL franchise out there that doesn't have at least 6 million fans. The Patriots have 25 million fans in their database, which is why that's such a successful center. But the Eagles, Ravens, Broncos, 9 million. So those will be the priority. The large universities, they've had several conversations with large universities, but even with the Sky Zone, it's going to come down to return on investment. Where's the best spend on capital now? And so that's an excellent opportunity. However, we have to think about it. It does trend younger. So, that would not be a place we would ever be able to put in the land dual. So we're going to prioritize, if we have the resources we have, we could probably build between 4 and 6 a year. If we get 4 or 6 that are coming from the large universities and the sports teams and casinos, clearly that's where we're going to dedicate 100% of our effort. If we don't have those opportunities, then we'll move down to the next tier, which would be in the Sky Zone area. And again, go for the younger audience, which would mostly just be based on arcade play and younger fans playing Fortnite and those titles. So, like I suspect all successful businesses will prioritize on what's going to give us and our shareholders the best return. That's where the focus is going to be.
And part of the attractiveness of this acquisition with GG Circuit and, of course, the Helix platform may provide you the opportunity to get involved more so in embedded with the casinos, right? So where do you stand with your discussions with potential casino operators?
Well, there's quite a number of different casinos that have reached out to us, both in the native gaming as well as the traditional big brands. It's fair to say, and I've spoken on many panels on this topic, the casinos are all trying to figure out esports. How do they fit it into their mix? Because they want the younger demographic. They want that 21 to 35-year-old player coming into the casinos. And right now, they're not getting that foot traffic. They do with poker. Poker is still successful with that demographic, but slots don't work, and games of chance are not really interesting to that demographic. Esports clearly is the majority of where that demographic gets their entertainment. So trying to integrate that into casino, they know, they've seen HyperX, which is an awesome facility, but it's only busy, it's an event venue. It's busy when you have, a tournament, which maybe once a week, probably once a month. What do you do the other, 6 days a week? So with the array that we've brought together, you've got the online, we're a turnkey solution for casino. We're a natural partner for them. You got the online tournament, you got the online betting, pushing, attracting people, pushing them into the physical facility. You got the Helix expertise on how to, what should the array look like? What's the mix between virtual racers, console, computer games, the big screens, etc. They have expertise in that. GG Circuit's the software that drives that. GG Circuit, I think there's 1,000 LAN centers that run off of GG Circuit software. So they are absolutely the experts on this. And then, of course, with the LAN duel, you have that. Casinos particularly, you've got the product that's very interesting in casinos because people will come. They don't want an arcade. People just come in to play on, play on video game stations. They want them to be betting, and they want to take that VIG of that action, like a poker room, and that's LAN duel. The one thing that's really interesting with LAN, well, that's interesting itself, but the other aspect of LAN duel that's particularly interesting, if I'm playing you, Michael, and we're playing Madden, because that is who we're going to launch with. That is the time we're going to launch with. Jeff could watch our play, and he could bet on that game, back bet. Now that's gambling. That can only take place in a casino. So the casino gets two bites at the apple. You and me playing, they're going to take a piece off the VIG, and then effectively the sports book action that's taking place on our amateur play. So that is, then this is where the conversations go. So when we roll it out, the demo in Atlantic City later this year, there'll be a lot of casinos in attendance watching how that goes. And that will, from that point forward, that will accelerate the conversations. But yeah, we've been approached by several. Would be the best way to leave it for now.
Yeah, it sounds like a great opportunity. Going back, you touched a little bit about signing some of these agreements with traditional sports teams. And most recently, I know that you hosted a tournament play with the LA Kings. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that tournament, how it went, what you learned from the event, possible changes, things like that.
Yeah, the first event we did a free event because we were just testing to see how the first event would go. So it was really a learning experience for both us and for the team. How the fans, how the fans respond, how often, how many, what was the interest. So in that particular case, what we learned was if we're going to pick a title, it has to be a title that has more universal in terms of its footprint. They picked a title that you either had to pick Xbox or PlayStation. And so whichever way you go, you're eliminating 40, 50% of the market. We've learned if we're going to do that, we have two winners. We're going to have the Xbox winner, we're going to have the PlayStation winner. That was an important thing to learn, and we did it on. It's good that we did it on a test as opposed to having, a lot of cash in the line. We learned that you don't want to, if it's a pro sports team, the fans are focused first on the team. They love playing video games, but they're passionate fans of first the Kings that play video games. So as we're moving towards the playoffs, the activity of the team, the marketing activity, if we put out a tweet that there's a tournament up tonight, it would be buried by 10 tweets of what's going on the ice that night. So you learn we're dealing with pro teams. We've got to be loud when they're fairly silent. Like there's not a big event taking place. It's not the Super Bowl. We do not want to run a tournament on that day because nobody's going to show up. So these are lessons you learn. These were the first time a tournament's been done like that, certainly by us with these teams. And those are lessons that we now can bring into the launch of these other tournaments. the first NFL tournament's running next week or next month with the Ravens, which has a much bigger footprint. And so we're taking the lessons learned from the first one and we're bringing those in here. So we're going to have 2 winners. It's Madden is the game they want to play. And we've also already started some conversation with the teams that maybe they should start thinking about Fortnite or a game like that goes across all the platforms. So again, it's an evolving process. The teams are very excited to work with us. They know and we know it's an organic thing. It's going to evolve as the lessons we learn with one team. We're going to implement all the positive lessons, and it'll help us avoid replicating any mistakes. So it's successful. We're going to be announcing the winners, social media, I think next week, because the team is giving prizes for the people who won, and we're going to set up the next round with the Kings is going to take place after the playoffs, just so that we don't have we're not competing with the central business of the partner.
Still opportunity, great opportunity there. And I know that I have a ton of other questions to ask, Grant, but we're kind of running out of time. And so I want to conclude with a question about the stock price and the stock performance. And, the shares have kind of drifted recently. And I wondered if you can talk a little bit about what you might attribute that weakness to. Some might think, well, it might be over concerns over the Helix acquisition or transaction, or maybe the air coming out of takeover speculation that I think was in the stock there for a moment. But nonetheless, the stock is trading below esports peers as well as iGaming peers. And so what do you think in terms of the stock, and why do you think that the stock may have drifted a little bit here? And as you had mentioned, that most analysts, including myself, believe that the stock should be north of $20 a share. What do you think needs to happen to kind of move the needle in getting the stock price reflective of where some of your peers are trading currently?
Yeah, well, that's been as I'm sure if you could see Jeff's face, he's probably smiling right now. It's been a constant theme in our conversation. I think it's a bit of a combination of everything you touched on there. In addition, microcaps did take a bit of a beating for the last couple of weeks, and we're certainly no exception. I do believe that a lot of it comes, or at least the institutional money is probably waiting to see if we're going to do a dilutive event. It's not going to happen. We're not going to. So if this comes out before the acquisition, they can rest assured of that. I think with retail, and you mentioned the takeover, the GameStop, that one bit of speculation that GameStop should. It wasn't that GameStop was talking to us. We actually had been talking to GameStop about providing them with some services, which I believe they can still use. We can help them take them from sort of a Blockbuster model to a Netflix model. That said, they've had lots of changes in management. Whatever their strategy is, I don't know, of course, but they have not reached out to us to acquire us. It was just speculation that they need to put a digital strategy in place, and we were a logical candidate. That's where that came from. That said, GameStop really did change some things with the way young investors, particularly, who may not be like yourself, detail centric. It's kind of momentum centric, it seems. There was an IPO last week or the week before. The company's revenues is below what we'll do on our passive revenue on the cryptocurrency mining. We'll make more when the computers are turned off than they'll make. Yet they were the new shiny penny, and everybody kind of rushed over there, and they have a $600 million market cap. We drifted down. When the fundamentals all come out, that will come back. It has to come back. Lead balloons can't fly. So that was a factor because it was directly a competitor to us. At least it looks like it was on the surface. The microcap issue, and I think also the funds, the institutional investors, thinking there might be a dilutive event. I think all three of those together combined for it. When people understand that there won't be a dilutive event, we're very pleased with our first quarter. I can't get into details at this point in time, but when we have our earnings call, I think the market in general will be pleased with the results of our first quarter. And I think that at that point in time, the institutional people, the institutional investors will get more comfortable with the story, because if you look at our projections, which are based on pretty conservative hard numbers, because we're acquiring. Keep in mind, we acquire GG Helix. We know next year they're going to do 17 million. We acquire Lucky Diamond. We know it's doing 30 million next year. It's not like, hey, if things work perfect, we have a good shot at taking 20% of the market and making none of that. None of the speculation's in there. None of the speculation on Landul. There's zero revenues contemplated in Landul in those projections. There's none of the revenues from these tournament platforms, because we don't know what they're going to do. It's entirely, you have a fan base with the patrons of 25 million fans. Who knows how many sign up to play? 500,000 people sign up to play. It's as much revenue as the entire rest of the company. So who knows how much they do, but we don't want to be speculative. We don't want to be promotional. Jeff and Dan will work on the numbers when we have hard numbers to work from. So I think when people see that, unfortunately, people who sit in my seat oftentimes get a little optimistic in their projections. And consequently, institutional investors have learned to become quite skeptical of projections. And I suspect, they think we may be like that. That won't be the case. We'll be able to show that. And I think once everybody gets comfortable with what we just talked about, and when our earnings report, I think we'll be rewarded, and the share price will go back to where the analysts like yourself, the experts, believe we should be. That would be our natural place, and we'll get there. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It bothers me. I'm not going to tell you it doesn't. that would be a lie. It does bother me, as Jeff knows. It's kind of my daily bellyache, but it is what it is. I don't have, I can't do more than what we're doing. All we can do is just deliver what we said we do.
Well, you certainly described a fun, dynamic growth industry, and it certainly gave us a lot of color about esports and your growth opportunities. Grant, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us today. I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us for this C-Suite interview presentation brought to you by ChannelChek. Visit our YouTube channel for more interview content, as well as virtual roadshows and conference presentation replays. New content is added regularly, so subscribe below to stay up to date. Visit channelchek.com or click the link in the description to access equity research, news, and advanced market data on this and the 6,000 other small and microcap companies listed.